Hello there folks and welcome back to another episode of the Joe and Toby Talk podcast. Today we are discussing the Betfred World Snooker Championship, the 2021 edition, and finally we have a World Snooker Championship back in April. It's not back at the Crucible, but it's at the Crucible every year, but we've got fans and Ronnie O'Sullivan is the holder. We're here today, myself and my co-host Captain Goodspeed, or Joe Hannard, to discuss the 2021 World Championship, preview the championship, talk about each of the contenders and give our thoughts on all of the runners and riders. Now, it is the best Saturday of the year, being back at the Crucible with the BBC, Hazel or Eurosport, if that's your preferred place to watch, but you can hear by the tone in my voice it's not mine. But we don't have a choice sometimes. But with me today is my co-host, Mr. Hannard, Joe. So say hello, Joe.
Hello.
And what do you think? We're finally back for the World Championship. We've had a busy season. You know, the season started a little bit later this year. Some different events, which again I don't think we've been too enamoured with. But nevertheless, it's been a good season of snooker. But ultimately, whatever events there are, the World Championship's the pinnacle, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. We've had pretty much non-stop snooker since June the 1st last year when we started with the Championship League, and of course we had the World Championship back in August, but nothing compares to it. And I think the amount of media attention that the qualifiers were getting, and one match in particular, which we'll talk about in a bit, there's no buzz quite like it, and having thousands of people watching the qualifiers for the event is something that you would not get for any other tournament, and there is a buzz about, and obviously it's great to have the fans back. There's talk that there's going to be 100% capacity for the final, which is bonkers. So it'll be great to have them back and not have the willy won'ty man on the button pressing the applause.
Oh God, yeah. Some of that was terrible on some of the events. It was cringeworthy. I can't remember what I was watching, whether it was snooker or something else, but the clapping was dreadful. I think it was the first day of Cheltenham when they tried to repeat the Cheltenham roar, and that just didn't work at all. But it's not been too bad for the snooker, I suppose. But I guess the first thing we talk about is that fan element. Now, from a sporting point of view, it's great. From a personal point of view, I'm not sure I agree with it, but I think a lot of this is down to Barry Hearn. I don't think there's any question about that. The one obvious player that isn't too happy about that is the holder, Ronnie O'Sullivan. Don't think anybody's too surprised about that. With some of his family members having a really bad COVID-19. And personally, I'm not sure I agree with it as well. But like all these things in the current world we live in, you take your own risk. And, if that's the risk you want to take, you can. And also, obviously, the refund options have been given as well. So fans can do whatever they like with the tickets. However, from a sporting point of view, 100% sporting point of view, as a Liverpool fan, I'll definitely concur this. Fans make all the difference, don't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it'll be very, very interesting for the players to have fans back. Of course, only Ronnie O'Sullivan and Kyron have had fans, other than that very first day of the World Championships last year. To have had fans since all of this kicked off, so it'll be very weird for them playing in front of fans, I would imagine, and not having the ultimate silence that we've been accustomed to this season. Sometimes quite deafening silence, especially if you're watching Eurosport. It's personal opinions can come into it, and but we can't change anything really, whether we agree with it or not. And of course, Anthony Hamilton withdrew from the tournament over it last year, so still a couple of days for that to maybe happen this year. I don't think it will, but obviously Ronnie coming out and saying he's not in support of it, and I imagine a lot of the players are quite nervous about it. So.
Definitely, not to be stereotypical, but a lot of the Chinese players and the likes of Neil Robertson as well, who have spent seasons and times away from their families. I know it's the same for all of these players, but for some of the homegrown players, obviously they can go and see their families between tournaments. But for the likes of Robertson and some of the Chinese players, it's been something that, of course, they haven't been able to do. I know Ding has been over here, I think now, for over 12 months without seeing his family. And I don't think it's unreasonable for the likes of Ronnie to say, well, we should be protected.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Not from a PPE point of view, because that would be certainly a different perspective to Judd Trump's ban the waistcoats idea. I'm not sure how PPE would look on the snooker players, but nonetheless, I think it's a reasonable discussion to have for Ronnie O'Sullivan to come out and say this. I don't think he's attention seeking as some people have said. I think during the current times, it's an absolutely reasonable discussion to have. You can't go from one extreme to the other without having extreme caution. And I know that they've got COVID tests or the rest of it, but again, nothing's 100% safe, is it?
Yeah, and there's 3 sessions a day going on, which is the other variable in this. I didn't expect to be talking in this much detail about it, but it's three sessions a day in enclosed environments. It doesn't seem like the best idea. It didn't seem like the best idea last summer, and we're certainly in a worse position than what we were last summer, but we'll see how it goes. It got cancelled after one day last time, so we'll see. I'd be very, very surprised if we seen a full house for finals day. But nothing will replicate the atmosphere that we have when a crowd is in there. I do think it'll be quite awkward for the people in there at the start because everyone's been so used to the silence of it. It'll feel quite weird to be clapping. I don't know. It'll be very interesting to watch, and I'm sure we'll not hear the end of it from the commentators and the pundits and the presenters.
But can you shout "Come on the Hawk" or anything like that? I
know.
There's that debate to have as well. But to be honest, I think for a podcast talking about the World Championship, the last thing that people want us to talk about is COVID fans and all the rest of it. But one match that we've already seen that would have been far better without fans, with fans, no question about it, was the absolutely unbelievable, completely coincidental draw in the first qualifying round, which drew 2 of the game's greats together, Jimmy White and the returnee after retiring in 2012, returned to the circuit after 8 or 9 years, Stephen Hendry. I watched that match, and let's just say, if it was anybody else after the first 4 frames, I'd have turned it off. I don't know if you watched it all, but it was abysmal.
Yeah, I tried to watch as much as I could, but yeah, it's to be expected. All of the sort of first round qualifying matches tend to be quite scrappy affairs, to say the least, and it was just a bit of a shame to see. I think it meant a lot to both of them. I think particularly Jimmy White, who was fighting for his place on the tour. And I think had he won that match, he would have, on merit, actually stayed on the 1-year list. But Hendry kind of showed his old mettle in frame 3, I think it was, when he cleared up with 65 when there was 67 remaining, and he was 62 behind. I seem to remember that he rolled back the years then, and I think that's what broke the back of the match really for him. It didn't matter for Jimmy White anyway, because he's been given another 2-year tour card, which a lot of people disagree with. I know a lot of people within the snooker community really detest that decision, but personally, I don't see what difference it makes. It's one player, and we've seen that not all 128 players turn up for tournaments anyway, so it doesn't really matter to me. And I'd
contest that if there were 100 odd players on tour who were, let's say, top 16 standard in effect. Let's just say that it's a very even playing field, and because Jimmy White gets a tour card, somebody have real potential misses out, but there just isn't that, is there? I know that Ronnie has said that anyone below the bottom 64 he'd have to chop his arm off or something to lose against them, which, you know, I guess would make things quite tricky. But at the end of the day, I don't see any problem with giving the likes of Jimmy, Hendry, obviously we've seen King Doherty as well.
James Watner.
And ultimately, these players, you know, you're not telling me, I know it was the lovely grandeur of Jimmy and Hendry, but even if it's Jimmy, Hendry, or Ken, these matches are going to get a lot more viewers when compared to some of these other players, aren't they? You know, it's something for another podcast, I guess, but Judd Trump's been really critical of that whole nostalgia feel in snooker, hasn't he? And there's been a lot of support for Judd's stance, particularly from fellow professionals, which surprises me. But I don't really see it. I understand some of his comments and the way he's coming from. And if you haven't seen that interview, it's well worth a read. I think it's on one of the newspaper sites here in the UK. But it is well worth a read because Judd thinks that the game should be modernised. And whilst I agree with some of his principles, the whole principle of that you know, the giving invitational tour cards, it's something that isn't really going to break the bank as such. It's not something that's going to cause a massively adverse effect. And, you know, Jimmy White's passion for snooker if he wants to keep on playing, and clearly he's good enough, by the way. He had a good event, didn't he, at the Gibraltar Open?
Yeah, he got the last 16. Yeah,
he's as good as his contemporaries.
Yeah.
And
you know,
I feel like the way he's played over the years, he's kind of deserved the right to get these tour cards. They don't give them out for nothing, do they?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, he got up to 11 on the 1 year list that didn't qualify for a new 2 year tour card, and I mean that. The only reason he was knocked out of that top 8 is because it is so heavily weighted towards World Championship performance, which, you know, again, that's a discussion for another day as well, of how ridiculous it is how you can turn up for one tournament a year and keep your tour card in a sense. But hey, but no, I just don't see the issue with it really. I think you know, you're getting the same amount of Q school spots, and you know, it's all worked out so that nobody is missing out in a sense. So I guess it could be one extra player from Q school makes it, but you know, we've seen very few of the Q school players are actually staying on tour anyway. You know, there's been a handful over the last 5 years that have made it into the top 64, and you know, a whole lot more dropping off the tour after 2 years after not really doing anything. So I don't see the issue personally.
Put it this way, it's not a first world problem, is it, in
No.
terms of the issues that snooker does face? It's not one of those issues. We didn't see, obviously, Stephen Hendry qualify. He lost in his next match against Sue C, 6 frames to 1. And I watched the first few frames of that match, and Hendry was incredibly unlucky because if he'd have won that third frame, then the game could have been entirely different. But I think after that, he just lost his mojo. So we didn't see either of those players qualify, but we did see a bit of a surprise from that group. Now, you might have predicted it, I can't quite remember, because as two sad individuals as we are, before the third round of qualifying, we had a quick butchers through the groups and said who we thought would qualify, and unfortunately haven't kept that to hand, because I'd have definitely beaten him in the prediction game there.
Yeah.
But Liam Highfield qualified over Zhao Yu Long. I don't think that's a result that many people were expecting, particularly given that out of all the qualifiers, Zhao Yu Long was the top seed.
Yeah, and you know, Zhao Yu Long very unlucky not to be in the top 16, I think, and automatically qualify. I think he would have been a danger for anyone who drew him in the first round. So it was a big surprise that he went out to Liam Highfield, but you know, these things do happen, and that's the beauty and the curse of a best of 11 at the end of the day. You know, it's a one session match, and if you're not on it for that one session, then you're out, and that's that's a pity for Zhao, but he's had a good season, and I think he'll be comfortably in the top 16 this time next year, I would imagine, and maybe even win his first event, which is a bold prediction, but
I don't think it's too bold the way he's been playing. I think he's been playing really well. I think he has, but you look at, I mean, who was Liam? Well, there you go. Liam Highfield's got Judd Trump, so I think that Zhao Yulong can have a little bit of satisfaction.
But I think Zhao Yulong is the type of player that could run Judd very, very close in the first round. Judd's got a very poor record of winning comfortably in the first round. He tends to make it very difficult for himself. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I think Liam Highfield needs a good start. Of course, the fans will be behind Judd because apparently everybody's a massive fan of Judd Trump at the moment. But
I think
I think qualifying in general was a pretty good standard. Certainly towards the end, I think at the start it was a bit of a scrap fest. But personally, for me, I think qualifying was overshadowed by what I think is one of snooker's biggest issues, and that's accessibility to watch it. Of course, there was a massive campaign for the White and Hendry match to be on TV, even on just the Eurosport channel, and by the way, they were showing a repeat of the 2018 World Final while the match was on. I mean, what on earth? But you could only watch it through the Eurosport app, which obviously you had to pay for. Most people redeemed a free trial. I know us included did that. But it's something that I think is severely lacking in snooker, is free to air tournaments. Now obviously BBC have the big three. They've got the Welsh Open on BBC Wales. ITV have had a couple of tournaments the last few years, which is good. But Eurosport has the monopoly on it, and as much as people like to rave about Eurosport's coverage, I think they're very, very poor at actually covering all of the snooker matches. You know, I think we've said in the past, on Table 2 it'll still be playing, but they'll go off and show cycling highlights or something, rather than move over to the other table, which is what BBC would do, obviously. So I think that's what the qualifiers were overshadowed by, certainly at the start of it. And I would like to see them do more stuff where they're showing it on Facebook and YouTube like they did for Judgment Day, because I think that works really well. You know, where they're switching between the matches and you can keep up to date with what's going on. I think that's what they should be doing for all of the qualifying rounds going forward, personally.
I can't say I disagree with that too much. No, The problem about accessibility with Eurosport is so for instance, I'm a Sky subscriber and I have Sky Sports, which means I get Eurosport as well. So effectively, even though it's not the main aim of having Sky Sports, I pay for Eurosport. Mm-hmm. Even though I pay for Eurosport through my Sky subscription, I would still have to pay for an additional Eurosport app subscription, which is absolutely crazy. And I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's $7.99 a month, isn't it? Or
which is lines. Like £2 cheaper than Netflix. That's the context we're going into here. PlayStation Now is $4.99 a month.
Exactly.
It's just, $7.99 is far too much for what they're offering. For me, I don't think they show enough sports to really, as the doorbell goes off, they don't show enough sports to warrant that price for me. But that's again another issue for another day, I suppose.
Yeah, but just finally, before we go off that issue, how many times did I message you saying, how the hell, where can I find this match? I mean, I was on the player, and it wasn't even advertised. I had to go through all the channels. It was on something like Extra 8, wasn't it, or Extra 7? And
it was always on 6 to 9, and it was, and again, they were only showing 2 matches. When there was,
and one of those without any sound. No commentary. Yeah. There was no sound at all.
It's just an embarrassment, really. That
it is. And I think it just sums up Eurosport for me. I'm not being too damning towards it, but I think this has to be said that just typifies how it's just low budget
Yeah, low budget, amateurish, is what I would call Eurosport's coverage. And, we'll probably get a lot of flack for that, but it's true. They sound like they're doing their commentary in a toilet. They're using 2005 microphones. It's just... And, half of the time it's in standard definition.
It is.
It's an absolute joke that is the case. When you've got the BBC, for instance, that cover 3 tournaments a year and just have perfection in the coverage, in a sense of you can access it online, you can access it red button, you can you do it on the app, you can watch it live on the telly. And it's all in crisp HD, and the sound quality is perfect. And I always find, actually, Eurosport seem to turn down the actual the snooker volume, if you like. So the table volume. The ambient volume and the volume of the ref. I always find that incredibly quiet. But then when it's a BBC tournament, that's just as loud as the commentary, which I think is very important personally. But anyway, rant over.
Yeah. I think the final nail in the coffin in that discussion is that Judd Trump discusses modernising the game, and the game isn't even in high definition.
Yeah.
that's the mic drop there. That's it. And we're not going to talk about that anymore. But we are nearly 20 minutes into this. So let's get cracking with some actual snooker, shall we? So let's just scan through the rest of the qualifiers. So I don't think we need to spend that much depth on each of the groups. Bit of a shame about Alan Mcmanus. Of course, he's now retired from the game, but he's had a good career, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, one of my best memories of Alan Mcmanus was when he got to the semi-finals back in 2016. It was a terrific run to the final, at the semi-final, and because Alan had been a bit of a journeyman for a good 15 years before that, really. He dropped out of the top 16 in the mid-noughties and then just had this resurgence over the last few years where he was, competing, and it was a bit of a surprise that he retired, but he had dropped off the tour. Would he have got an invitational tour card? Who knows? But he's gone, and wish him a very happy retirement, and hopefully we hear some more of him in the commentary box, because he's certainly...
He's one of the best pundits around.
Yeah.
He's one of the best pundits around for me, definitely. So, the game's loss will definitely be the BBC. I mean, he commentates for all of them, bless him, so...
Yeah,
he gets round, does angles.
The only one that works harder than him
somewhere
is he gets all round the angles.
You got it.
The only one that seems to have worked harder than him this season is Ken Doherty, who's been on every single tournament that I've seen. It's ridiculous how much he's been doing. Because he was even doing the seniors.
There's not much else to do, is there? There's not much else to do.
Well, yeah, I suppose, but it's a shame that we haven't had any of the sort of old guard qualify this year. The likes of Matthew Stevens, Graham Dott, you mentioned. Obviously, Jimmy didn't qualify, Stephen didn't qualify, Alan, Ken, Nigel Bond. So many old names that you usually see one of them or two of them at the Crucible, but we're not seeing any of them this year, and it could really signal the start of the sort of new blood coming through. I think we've seen a little bit of that this season, with the likes of Yan Bingtao winning a Triple Crown event. So it'll be interesting going forward whether that's, we're ever going to see the likes of Ken Doherty at the Crucible again. It would be a shame if not, but it's looking unlikely at this point.
Yeah, I agree. And talking about young blood, and maybe not quite so young blood at the age of 43, but Igor Figueiredo very nearly became the first South American, well, at least Brazilian anyway, to qualify for the World Championships. And came from the first round as well. He beat Farrak Arjib in the first round by 6-0, and had some pretty impressive wins in there. He beat Robbie Williams and third seed Tepchiro Newell to get to the final Judgment Day, but lost to another. I think I'm right in saying Mark Joyce is a Crucible debutant, isn't he?
He is the only Crucible debutant this year.
Yeah,
No. Sorry, there's one more.
Chances,
Sam Craigie is another debutant.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mark Joyce. I mean, I was baffled that he hadn't qualified for the Crucible before. Actually, he actually got the final of the Riga Masters a couple of years ago. I think it was the year when all the players couldn't fly because they all got stuck at Luton Airport or something.
Oh God, yeah, I remember that. That was that seems so. Doesn't seem like long ago at all. But if you look at that group, it's a real surprise that those two guys got to the final. Over Robbie Williams, Hamilton, Tep Chiron, even Rory McLeod. Rory McLeod's on his day.
I mean, Rory McLeod has won a match at the Crucible before, so there was plenty of players there that could have troubled, and fair play to both of them. And exactly. Mark Joyce has got the death draw really. I think Ronnie O'Sullivan has got probably the best first round record that there's ever been at the Crucible. So it will be a very much uphill task for him. But I just hope he plays his best, and I think if he does play his best, then it'll make Ronnie play well, which I think is needed for the tournament. I think we've always said this: if Ronnie doesn't play well at a tournament, it sort of loses its buzz in a way. Especially if he goes out on the opening day, I think it will kill it flat for a few days at least. So we'll see.
No, I agree.
We'll see what happens.
I agree with that.
We'll talk about that in a minute. Have you got anything else to say about the qualifiers? Obviously, we'll talk about some individual people throughout. But have you got any more general thoughts?
I think one thing is I'm chuffed to see Liang Wenbo get to the Crucible. Some real nice names that have got in there, but I think before we finish, one special mention, or maybe not so special, for a Welshman, Jamie Clark, who did so well last year, and it's fair to say he bottled it, didn't he?
He did.
7-2 up?
He was certain. He might have even been 8-2 up against Mark Davies.
Mark Davies,
I mean that's a shame for Jamie Clark, but again he's had an alright season. I think he's the sort of player that'll be on the lower end of the top 64 for a few years, which I think is good, and he might have the occasional run to quarterfinals, semi-finals, or do a Jordan Brown, who knows. But nice to see him play well, and obviously good to see some familiar faces back at the Crucible that haven't been there for a little while. But we'll talk about them as and when. So the plan for the rest of the podcast is to talk about each of the quarters of the draw, and sort of think about who we might see steering a path through the Crucible. We'll have a little look at the odds now and then as well, as we always do with our podcast, because Toby is a gambling addict. No, I shouldn't joke about that really. And of course we'll tell you what our predictions are. We've both done an event predictor, so we'll tell you who we think will win
who to avoid,
who to avoid, who we think might win the Betfred World Snooker Championship 2021. So starting off with the first quarter. So of course you've got defending champion Ronnie O'Sullivan, and he's taken on Mark Joyce. We've also got Anthony McGill taking on Ricky Walden. Ding Junhui taking on Stuart Bingham in probably the tie of the round, and Stephen Maguire taking on the returning Jamie Jones. So what do you think about that top quarter there? What stands out?
It's an obvious statement to make, but Ronnie O'Sullivan has to be favourite to get out of that 8 and make it to the semi-final. I think there isn't really much. It's great for Mark Joyce to get to the Crucible. I mean, we said the same about James Cahill a few years ago, and look how that went. But I think Ronnie will win that one quite comfortably. Looking below that, Anthony McGill against Ricky Walden. I fancy the qualifier to win that one.
Yeah, I think that's... Ricky Walden played terrific against Ryan Day, who is no mug in himself. to get through. And you know me, I'm a big fan of Ricky Walden actually, and I think on his day he's a trouble for anyone. But Anthony McGill, I was reading an article today. He thinks he can win the World Championship, so he's certainly talking the talk. So it'll be interesting to see who comes out of that. But I'm with you. I've went for Ricky Walden for that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And then obviously out of those two, you'd probably have to back Ronnie to beat Ricky in that second round, wouldn't you? Really?
Over 25 frames, I think it's very difficult to see Ronnie being beaten by Ricky Walden. And you know, I think the draw could really, really open up for Ronnie very quickly.
Absolutely.
If he gets through the first couple of rounds, which are always a sticky point really for players. But if Ronnie can win them comfortably, give himself a few days off here and there, I think that would really help him.
Absolutely. So Ronnie is second favourite, isn't he, for the tournament, I believe?
He is, yes. He is 4-1. So Judd Trump 11-4 for favourite. Ronnie second favourite. And then you got Neil Robertson at 5s, Mark Selby at 8s, and Higgins at 9s.
Interesting. We'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
So we think Ronnie's going to get out from that first 4, and I think it's fair to say he'll probably get out the first 8. But let's talk about the other 4 then in that quarter. At the tie of the round, I think without much question, is Ding Junhui and Stuart Bingham, of course, players that have won events on the Triple Crown. Stuart Bingham, former world champion from 2015, and being a Bingham fan myself, I was chuffed to see him qualify. A tough draw for Bingham with Ding Junhui. And we were talking about this one before we came on air, and Joe thought that this one could be close. And while I see where he's coming from, I think Bingham will win this at quite a canter. I really do. I think that, much like the match against Brissell that saw him qualify, he didn't start well. Brissell went ahead, but I think he'll come to life in that second session, personally, on the 20th of April. And from what I've seen of Ding Junhui, again, maybe influenced a little bit by the fact that he's played Ronnie O'Sullivan on many times I've watched him, but I've not been too impressed with the way that Ding's played recently, I have to say.
Yeah, I know. I can't really disagree with anything you've said there. I think Ding's been in a bit of a rut since winning his third UK Championship in 2019, I want to say.
Yeah, he played quite a long. Didn't he? I mean, that was a weak tournament generally, wasn't it? I hate to belittle Ding here, because he's a sort of player that if he gets through that first round, there's no reason why you can't win the damn thing. But I just don't see it. There's something since that UK Championship, and he just seems sloppy, I guess.
I
he's
think
so good with his position, etc., and it just seems to have gone away from him a little bit. His short game, whilst good, his long game just isn't there.
Yeah, and I think, whenever I look at Ding Junhui in a match, I see him as a player that can be beaten. And I think that's something that if I've picked up on it, the professionals will have, and I think that's, they know that Ding is there for the taking. He did drop out of the top 16 a few years ago, and when he did, he reached the final, and that could be something that Stuart Bingham does. He's had 2 matches, he's played very, very well in those matches, he's scoring well, he's had a good second half of the season, actually, Stuart Bingham. So I agree with you. I think he is the favourite going into that, which you don't often say about a qualifier, but I think Stuart Bingham is the favourite for that match, and with you, I think he'll come through. And then he'll be up against either Stephen Maguire or Jamie Jones. Now I know you're a fairly new fan of snooker over the last few years, so you may not have come across Jamie Jones before, but he's a former quarter-finalist at the Crucible, and actually was very much a top 32 player back a good few years ago before he was suspended. And he's taken on Stephen Maguire, who's just, for me, been nowhere this season other than the Welsh Open, I think, where he got the semis. But what do you think about that match? Obviously, having not seen much of Jamie Jones, what's your take on it?
I just think it's that whole best of 19 again. I appreciate Jamie Jones, of course, like Steve Maguire, have both got experience, but I've got to back the seed there. I know I haven't seen a lot of Jamie Jones, but all the same, I think that, like his fellow compatriot Mr. Higgins, I think Maguire will come alive a little bit during this event. So, whilst it pains me to say it, I think Maguire will overcome Bingham as well and make it to the quarterfinals before I think he succumbs to Ronnie O'Sullivan. I just think any which way, and being a bit of a Bingham fan, or I guess any of the underdogs, there's just no realistic way. I mean, I guess unless Ricky Walden beats him over a best of 25, I just can't see it really. Unless Ronnie has a really bad day, Ronnie has to be the odds-on favourite, if not more than that, to get to the semi-final.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the draw has really opened up for Ronnie. I think he's got an excellent record against all of the players in his section. So it's hard to see Ronnie not being the one that comes out on top. A bit of a surprise, but I've got Jamie Jones coming through the other sort of eighth of the draw, and having him against Ronnie in the quarterfinals. So will be very interesting. So moving on to the second quarter, we have got the Wizard of Wishaw, John Higgins against Tian Peng Fei, who beat Stephen Maguire in the first round a couple of years ago. Mark Williams is taking on debutant Sam Craigie. Mark Allen, the pistol, is taking on Lou Haashan, and Mark Selby, the jester from Leicester, who's been a little bit reinvigorated this season, it's fair to say, is taking on Norway's Kurt Mafflin, who again got the quarter-final last year, so it'll be very interesting to see if he can back up that performance, because he's done nothing else this season, so it'll be interesting to see. What are your initial thoughts looking at that quarter?
Now, bold claim. I think John Higgins is going to make it to at least the final.
Oh.
Right, that's the bombshell. Tian Peng Fei, I accept he could be a good player. Higgins has got him sorted, I think, over a best of 19. Now, a player I really want to talk about here, because he deserves the talk here, is none other than the Welsh Potter machine, Mark Williams, because I think he is a player that is massively overlooked for this tournament. Now, I know that he goes with his whack it about around the table and all that, and all this bravado as such from Mark Williams.
Yep.
But I think he has got a serious chance. The only snag for Mark Williams is the man I mentioned before, John Higgins. I think if Higgins has a bad day, honestly, I don't think there's any reason why Mark Williams can't win the World Championship. I really believe that, because if you then look at the tournament tree, and let's say it's Ronnie against Mark Williams in a best of 33, I would back Mark Williams in a best of 33 against Ronnie. I would. I think not in a best of 19 or 25, but I just have a hunch over that longer period. Both players of similar ilk in effect. Ronnie can be that player when he gets wound up to whack it round the table. And Mark Williams, I think really, I guess only Mark Williams and John Higgins can really challenge Ronnie O'Sullivan, I believe. I think over that length of time, I know Mark Selby did his best to do it last year, and very nearly did, if it wasn't for let's say a miracle from Ronnie O'Sullivan. But I think that is the first big challenge for Ronnie. But talking about Mark Williams, we don't discuss the other rookie, Sam Craigie, who's made it to the Crucible for the first time after beating Zhao Xingtong in his qualifier. A bit of a surprise there, given I thought Hossan Fafai or Zhao Xingtong would qualify from that group.
Yeah, so I'd love to see Hossein qualify. I think he's a really top quality player. Just doesn't seem to bring it for the World Championship. But
Craigie beat him 6-0.
There's
some praise to be had there, but once again,
I've heard a lot of people talk about Sam Craigie, but again, I think over the best of 19, Mark Williams is just going to have too much for him, in my opinion. And I agree with you on the Mark Williams topic of he could be a serious contender. And speaking quietly, he is 40-1 to win the tournament. 40-1.
What is he? Is he sort of half odds then to get to the final? 20 or 25?
16-1. 16.
Okay, that's not a bad shout, actually. That might be the bet of the round. I really
there's some
that.
very odd odds on Sky. You've got players very similar for the winner, but very, very different for the final. Between each other, they've got the same odds to win, but very different odds to reach the final, which I find a little bit bizarre. But I actually think this is the strongest quarter of them all. Not necessarily from the qualifiers, but the actual names: John Higgins, Mark Williams, Mark Allen, Mark Selby. Any one of those in their week could win the World Championship. So I think that's a very, very strong quarter. Williams versus Higgins is going to be a great spectacle, and I really do hope it happens. And that we're not left disappointed, because that will be a cracker. We talk about the class of '92, and it's always very much Ronnie versus John or Ronnie versus Mark Williams, but we very rarely see John versus Mark, and I think that'll be great. And a repeat of the 2011 semi-final, actually, which was a brilliant match as well. So I'm really looking forward to that if that happens.
If they play, do you think they've played each other since that final a couple of years ago?
No idea. I mean, I'd totally forgotten that they played 2018. I feel like an idiot now. I was trying to
subtly put that one in just in case you'd forgotten. But
no, I did.
They've played one another since then.
I can't think of a big match that they've played between each other. Obviously, they'll have played in the Championship League and whatever, but
let's just forget those ever exist. Let's forget those ever exist, shall we?
I mean, that was a terrific final, that one with Higgins and Williams, I think we'll see another Titanic battle actually, and I think I think you're right. I think either one of them could go on a big run this tournament. But looking at the sort of the second half of the quarter, so you've got Mark Allen versus Lou Haashan, and I think we've both predicted Mark Allen to lose that. Mark Allen, very anonymous again this season, and I think he's got a serious chance of dropping out of the top 16 soon if he's not careful. I'm not entirely sure how he's as high up as he is, to be brutally honest. But Lou Haashan, over the best of 19, will he be able to knock out Mark Allen? That's the other question.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Mark Allen is one of those players. I don't think there's anybody like him. I could be wrong. You might be able to draw a comparison. Where I look at some of his results and think, how on earth has that happened? It just...
Sean Murphy's the other one that I would say.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's definitely the one. But again, I don't want to say anything that might upset anyone, but from Sean Murphy, you might kind of expect it, because Sean Murphy's just an inconsistent player by nature. I just feel that... I feel like that with Sean Murphy. I kind of expect it with Sean Murphy, but Mark Allen, he's had a huge fall from grace, hasn't he, Mark Allen? Which is why we've both gone for Lou Haashan to win that tie. And that, I guess, opens up the draw slightly for Mark Selby. There's no way of avoiding one of the big class 92 for the quarter-final.
I think if...
And that's why I've put Higgins to get to the semis, you see. I just think that the way that Higgins is playing, I think that he'll beat Mark Selby, or whoever out of that four, whether it be Allen, Haashan, Selby, or even Kurt Mafflin, who I guess deserves a suggestion after a good run last year, doesn't he? I don't think he'll beat Mark Selby, but if he does, where does he go from there?
Yeah, I think Kurt is capable of beating Mark Selby. I think it's all going to be about those first 9 frames for me with that match. I think Kurt Mafflin's the type of player that once he's knocked off 1, he can knock off 2, 3, 4. And if he comes out 6-3 against Selby after the first 9, I'd fancy him to finish the job. But if Selby gets out of that first round, he's going to be a force to be reckoned with in this competition, I think. Last year, very unlucky not to win the whole thing. Just took some absolute out of this world snooker from Ronnie O'Sullivan to somehow beat him in the semis last year. So I think Mark Selby could be hard to stop, but as you say, playing either Mark Williams or John Higgins, he's got his work cut out.
He has. I think maybe if he's got Williams, he's got more of a chance. I think, although we've bigged Williams up, I think Williams against Selby wins that one. Just purely because of the contrasting styles of play. John Higgins can match Mark Selby there. I'm not sure Mark Williams can. And I think that maybe over a best of 9, best of 11 that the Williams tactic works, but over a best of 25 against Mark Selby...
Yeah.
There's just a clash there. I think Mark Selby will win too many frames for him. So out of those 8 players...
It's very interesting because Mark Williams is probably the best player at winning scrappy frames somehow. He's a very clever player. And I think with Mark Selby, you're guaranteed a lot of scrappy frames. And... I don't know. I've actually got Mark Williams to beat Selby in the quarters. I've got Mark Williams to win that quarter. I don't know what made me do it, but I think you'll beat John Higgins, and I think you'll beat Mark Selby as well, and I think you'll get to the semis to play Ronnie is what I've got.
Yeah, I know what you're saying there. I think without being critical, it has to be one of those 3, doesn't it? If it's not one of those 3 that makes it to the semi, whether it be John, Mark, Williams or Selby, it would be a real shock for any of the others, even Mark Allen, to make it to that semi-final, wouldn't it? I think even on a good week at the moment, you would be surprised if Mark Allen beat both Mark Selby and... John / Mark Williams.
Especially with Mark Allen's recent World Championship record. You know, he hasn't made it past the second round since he made the semis in 2009, I think. So that's not good. He's not going to reach the semi-final looking at that record. So yeah, I think you're right. And with a standard of players he's going to have to come up against, he'd have to beat Mark Selby and Mark Williams or John Higgins to get there, and I just don't see that happening personally. But yeah, okay. So who are you backing out of that quarter to make it through?
It's going to be John Higgins. And as I alluded to at the start of this discussion, I think he's going to make it to the final.
Okay, fair enough.
I think there's justification for Mark Williams, but that is going to be a really interesting group of 8. That is, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it really is. I think that's the one I'm most excited to see. Maybe not actually watching the matches, but seeing what happens in them. Yeah. I think that is going to be really, really interesting. So, moving on to the third quarter then, you've got Neil Robertson, who is always very well fancied at the Crucible, but never seems to turn up. Yeah. He's playing Liang Wenbo, and I think that's a very tough match for him. Jack Lezowski, your mate, is taking on Ali Carter, my mate, and Barry Hawkins is taking on Matt Selt, who seems to have... that match against Stephen Hendry seems to have done him the world of good, so I'm really interested to see that match. And Wilson versus Wilson, Kyron versus Gary, and I have to say, probably out of all of the qualifiers for me, Gary Wilson is probably the most surprising for me, just with the sheer drop-off that he has had since reaching that semi-final of the World Championships 2 years ago now, which is crazy to say. But that's an interesting quarter. It doesn't have quite the blockbuster names of the previous quarter, but there's potential in there for players to get to the final for me.
Definitely. I think one of the things about Gary Wilson, first to comment on him, and without being critical, he beat the 91st seed to qualify. He beat Gerard Green, 59th seed, and then Stephen Halworth. I think that looking at some of these draws, he could have had it a hell of a lot harder, couldn't he?
Yeah.
He, as you say, he's done nothing since his World Championship, and hopefully he can prove us wrong and do a lot better. Now, the Neil Robertson match, Robertson being my favourite player, it's a repeat of last year's match, actually. Last year's first round, Robertson against Liang Wenbo. So I'm sure that I echoed many of the same sentiments in last year's preview, that I worry about Robbo in the World Championship because, as you allude to, he's always well fancied and never really delivers the goods. That being said, if he gets past the first round, I would be inclined... I need to check if I've predicted this. Have I? Yes. if he gets past the first round, he makes the semi for me. And I think Wenbo could do something, but I don't think so against Robbo. I think in the first round, Robertson's got enough. And I also think he's got enough to beat either Lezowski or Carter. So then it's really one of the bottom four. That's an obvious statement to make. But I think the only player that could trouble him there is Kyron Wilson. And touching on the bottom two matches for a minute, I think if it's the two seeds that get through there, Hawkins against Kyron Wilson, I think, would be a smashing match. A little bit understated, potentially. It's not got the name of Higgins against Williams, but I think it's got the same sort of spectacle, potentially, with the sort of play it could turn into.
I've got a funny feeling they've played in the second round of the Worlds before and had a real ding-dong battle. I think either Wilson was well up and Barry Hawkins came back and won, or it was the exact opposite of that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that match as well. I think potentially Kyron and Barry have got some of the most difficult qualifying opponents. I know we just bashed Gary Wilson, but on his day, I think he could challenge Kyron. But Kyron's got a very, very good World Championship record, as does Barry. So it's gonna be an interesting one, that. But back to Neil Robertson. I've backed him to beat Liang Wenbo. Neil Robertson, interestingly, is third favourite for the competition, which I think is quite generous, actually. To be ahead of the likes of Mark Selby on the odds is quite a surprise to me. But Neil Robertson always seems to have a bad session or two in the tournament. I think he's quite lucky. He's avoided the likes of Higgins and Selby this time. That could bog him down. I think there's quite a lot of fairly fluent players in his quarter. So I think that will benefit him greatly. But another shout for tie of the round, if you like, is maybe Jack Lezowski versus Ali Carter. I know you're not a big fan of Jack Lezowski, but he's had a decent second half to the season, and it could be quite a close match for me, that one.
It could, and to be honest, you could say he's been one of the best, if not for one of the other best, Judd Trump, because when he seems to be doing well in these tournaments, he can beat any man apart from Judd Trump, his old mucker. I have backed Ali Carter for this one. I think Ali Carter is just scrolling through these qualifiers, maybe with the exception of Bingham, because of the fact he is a former world champion. I think Carter's got to be the worst qualifier to face against, and again, probably bar one, and this is going to upset a few people, probably bar one, or maybe two, I suppose, the two players below him. I guess that would stand to reason. The weakest top 16 player.
Yeah. I think in the World Championship, I completely agree with you. I think Jack Lezowski, on his day can beat anyone, but in the World Championship, I'm not sure he can sustain the way he plays.
He went out to McGill last year, and that match was just ridiculous. I remember that Lezowski bottled that.
Yeah. I mean, he missed the final blue or something, didn't he? So
yeah. I just don't fancy Lezowski. And don't get me wrong, there is a potential if he wins that match and gets on a run. He is another player like many of these that could well make it to the quarter/semi-final.
Yeah. So, but as you say, I don't see him beating Ali Carter, Neil Robertson, Kyron Wilson, and then potentially Judd Trump. There's too many obstacles.
Something I just thought, I would back Ali Carter to do that on his day.
Yeah, no.
I know that's a bold statement to make.
Yeah,
but he's another player, again, probably one of maybe 2, 3, possibly 4 of the qualifiers who could really rock the boat.
Yeah.
and go long into this tournament. He could be beaten 10-0. We could be talking rubbish.
Nah.
But on his day, Ali Carter, I mean...
Ali Carter's got an excellent World Championship record, obviously a 2-time finalist. He's been to the semis quite a few times. He's actually 66-1 to win the tournament. I don't think he will win it. And he's 22-1 to reach the final. But certainly... an interesting one to keep an eye on, because he can beat any of the players he's coming up against on his day. The only one you would suggest that he wouldn't be favourite against, well, he's not favourite for any of the matches, but I think he'd struggle against a John Higgins or a Mark Selby. I think they would beat him up, really, personally. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I've got Neil Robertson versus Kyron for the quarterfinal, and I think that would be an awesome match.
Interesting. I've gone for Robertson against Hawkins, because I just feel like if Hawkins gets a bit of momentum, he's been playing well recently as Hawkins. He's had, again, another player having a bit of a resurgence. Remember, it's quite incredible. He's ranked, where is he? He's ranked 11. Now, it was only a few weeks ago that we thought he wouldn't make the seed list, didn't we?
Yeah, well, he's been out of the top 16 all season. He didn't qualify for the Masters, obviously. He's been around 23 to 26 all year, and then all of a sudden something seemed to switch after the German Masters. And, I think, unfortunately, he's had a couple of bruising defeats where he should have won semi-finals and lost them for whatever reason, but... I've backed Kyron Wilson, and actually I've backed Kyron to beat Robbo in the quarters and get to the semis once again, which seems crazy for Kyron Wilson, but I have backed him to get there.
Okay, so I've backed Robertson to get there, although I think that's probably going to end up to be wrong. But a very interesting eight. The only player we haven't mentioned really there, apart from passing remarks, is Matt Sells.
Yeah. Matt Sell, I think he could be a dark horse in the competition, actually. I think, having watched a little bit of him play in the qualifiers and watched him against Hendry, I've actually been very impressed with what I've seen, and he seems to have a bit of belief, and hey, if he beats Barry Hawkins in that first round, he could go on a bit of a McGill or Gary Wilson type run. Dave Gilbert, we seem to get one player every year that gets to the semis that we're not expecting. And he could very much be that player for me. It's just blowing that trumpet about the best of 19 again for me. I think over a best of 19, you'd have to back Barry Hawkins. Matt Selt's probably played 3. He'll have played a lot more best of 19s than 3, but in recent years at least, with the whole best of 11 qualifiers for the Worlds over the last 2 years, it probably has been quite a while, other than the match he's just played, since he has played a best of 19. So and it's a totally different skill to play a match over 2 sessions, but we'll see what happens. I think he's got a good chance. I think Barry Hawkins, he'll be happy with that draw. He hasn't drawn Ronnie, but I think he'll be quite happy with that. So you're going for Robbo, I'm going for Kyron. So currently I've got Ronnie O'Sullivan, Mark Williams and Kyron Wilson to make it through to the semis. And who have you got?
So I've gone for Ronnie O'Sullivan, John Higgins, and then of course Neil Robertson. So okay. To be honest, I'm going to foreshadow something here. I've been really boring. I've gone with 4 out of the 5 favourites to get through to the semis.
It's interesting, isn't it? And I wouldn't be surprised, actually. I think there was a statistic that between Ronnie, Selby, Robertson and Trump, they've appeared in the final of every single ranked event this season.
That's a crazy stat, isn't it? That is crazy.
Yeah, which is just bizarre. But going into the final quarter then, which again I think this is an interesting one. We've got the magician Shaun Murphy against Mark Davies. Of course, Murphy could either get thrashed in the first round or he could go and win the event. Knowing him, he's one of them type of players. We've then got the Masters winner Yan Bing Tao against European Masters finalist Martin Gould, the Pinner Potter. We've then got David Gilbert, who is set to drop out of the top 16 down to 31 at the end of the season against Chris Wakelin. That's a very interesting match of not people you would fancy getting through the first round, but one of them will.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got the world number one, the favourite, Judd Trump, and he's taking on Liam Highfield. So, an interesting 8, I think. Obviously, Judd Trump is very, very strong favourite to get through that, but there's a couple of potential banana skins for him in there, in my opinion.
There is. I think there's one in particular, and that is the only non-Englishman, Yan Bingtao. I think that we spoke about this one again a little bit before we went live. I've got mixed opinions about Yan Bingtao. Now, I'm not to say the Masters was a one-hit wonder. Absolutely not. But I don't think he'll be a player that goes on and wins 20, 30 ranking events. He'll be a successful player, but I don't think he'll be that good. That being said, I think that out of those 8, he's the only banana skin. Without question, right, I think unless Judd Trump has an absolute disaster, he's pretty much as cert to be in the quarter-final. Dave Gilbert, Chris Wakelin, Liam Highfield, I can't see any of them beating him. It's just a case of him being too strong. Then, I actually think any player in the first 4, maybe Mark Davies excluded, could beat Judd Trump. So he's been rather fortunate there that he's been drawn against the 3 players of the 7 in his quarter, that I think you'd back him to win every time against those 3 players. So looking at the first match, we've got Shaun Murphy and Mark Davies. Now, I have gone for Mark Davies here, just as a curveball, really. I think the smart money would be on Shaun Murphy, but we know Mark Davies is a bit of a wily old fox. He's been there and done that. But I've gone for Mark Davies there. But in the second match, I have gone for is it Yan Bingtao's first time as a seed, or was he a seed last year?
No, I think it is. It's his second time as a seed. Yeah.
Yes, he was 16th seed, wasn't he, last year? That's
right. He went out to Judd. After being 6-2 up, I want to say as well, which is
something
is
like that. But I think I'd back him over a best of 19 to beat Martin Gould. But that could be another one of an understated yet very much get your popcorn out match.
I think it's an interesting one because I've not seen a lot of Yan since the Masters.
I don't think anybody has there? Really, he's gone off the radar a little bit, but that after such a big win, that's not really a surprise. We've seen that a lot with some of these players, and remember, of course, with his age, time's on his side, isn't it?
Yeah, I think Yan has got everything, and I do believe that one day Yan will win the World Championship. But whether it's this year or not, I don't know. Well, I'll talk about my predictions in a minute. But Shaun Murphy, I'm going to back him to have a decent tournament in the fact of his standard, not necessarily with how far he gets. But I fancy him to have a pretty comfortable victory against Mark Davis in the first round and get a few centuries in there. Look like he's playing brilliantly. And I've also backed Yan Bingtao to get through his round. Next, we've got Dave Gilbert and Chris Wakelin. Now, Dave Gilbert has had a bit of a poor season, and seems to be a bit, yeah. He seems to have lost his motivation somewhat, which a lot of us have done during lockdown, and I could only imagine how awful it is having to go to Milton Keynes every week to play a different tournament in the same venue. I just can't imagine how awful that is.
What did Ronnie call it? The pigsty?
Eh?
What did Ronnie call it? The pigsty?
Yeah, he called it a prison as well. So Class A prison, which he knows a lot about. So Chris Wakelin. Now, this is an interesting one because I only noticed it because I've seen it on my prediction, but Chris Wakelin actually played Judd Trump in the first round a few years ago and took him to 10-9. So I think this will be an interesting one. I think Chris might beat Dave Gilbert in the first round. I've actually backed him to do that, which obviously would put him up against Judd Trump. But remembering that he took him to 10-9, brought a little smile to my face of thinking that there might be some hope there. But I don't know, what did you go for? Did you go for Gilbert or Chris Wakelin?
Yeah, I've actually gone for Chris Wakelin. Just, again, as a bit of a hunch, because... not based on what you've said, to be honest, but that adds a bit of meat to the bones now. I know it's only one match, but Gilbert's just lost all touch altogether. And I think, let's be honest, he's lost that touch since he got to the semi-finals a few years back.
Yeah, I mean, he got to the semis of the Masters the year after. And obviously
was that the Bingham and Carter year?
Yeah, and I think he got to the final of quite a few events in the year after his semi-final. But this season in particular, I think he's well down on the 1 year list, maybe in the 60s, 70s, 80s region. And you know, if he has another season like that, he's going to find himself off the tour. So he's got to find something, and you know, we've seen it time and time again. Sometimes players just find this at the World Championship, and maybe with fans being back, the fact he's playing at the Crucible rather than Milton Keynes, maybe that will spur him on, and maybe he'll have a bit of a run at the tournament. But yeah, I've went for Chris Wakelin actually.
Yeah, it's a fair comment to make, to be honest. Again, as I've said, I feel sorry for these two because I can't see them going much further than the second round.
No, I mean, yeah, Judd Trump, the smart money would be on him getting to at least the quarterfinal, as you say. I think, barring Judd Trump being what he has been fairly recently, I don't see him going out in round 1 or 2.
It's a repeat of the Ronnie O'Sullivan discussion, isn't it, really? That unless there's a real surprise, Judd Trump is going to make it to the semi-final. I think Sean
interestingly,
Murphy, if he has a good run, could be there.
I think if you mirrored it and Mark Joyce and Ricky Walden were in Judd Trump's half, I would have fancied them to beat him a lot more, and I don't know why, but yeah, that's what I've gone for. So I've actually got a Yan Bingtao Judd Trump quarterfinal, which I think you had as well, or did you have Gouldy? I don't know.
No, I had Yan Bingtao to beat Gould, but yeah. I think it's not out of the question that Gould could beat Bingtao.
Yeah, no, it's certainly not, and you know, it's one of those ones that there will be seeds that fall, and Yan could quite easily be one of those. But I've actually backed Yan Bingtao to have a coming of age tournament here, and I've actually got him to beat Judd Trump in the quarterfinal, which completes my semi-final lineup of Kyron Wilson versus Yan Bingtao for a place in the final.
Okay, well, I've set up a Neil Robertson Judd Trump semi-final, which is probably more what you'd say off form. That Yan Bingtao prediction is very interesting. We'll see if it comes to fruit. So if we look then now at the real dying embers of the tournament. So my first semi-final is Ronnie O'Sullivan against John Higgins. So it renews that rivalry. We saw it a few events ago in the Masters. We saw it at, what was it now? Was it the Players? It was one of the Coral events.
Players Championship.
There we go. Yeah, the Players Championship, which John Higgins won at pretty much a canter. Over a best of 33, we discussed it a little bit earlier, so I'm going to make it short and sweet. I'd back John Higgins to beat Ronnie O'Sullivan, which puts him into the final. And then, again, to repeat something I've said before, to have a rerun of the 2019 final, I want to say. John Higgins against Judd Trump, wasn't it? Neil Robertson against Judd Trump. Again, I'm going to back Judd Trump over a best of 33. And I'm going to back Judd Trump to do the same as what he did to John 2 years ago and win the event. So, at the end of my predictor, it comes out of a Judd Trump win. But as Joe will know, we've done quite a few of these this year, and most of my finals have been Judd Trump against Mark Selby. And when I've predicted that, neither player has got past the second round. So let's see if that comes to fruit. I'm not really bothered for Judd's sake, but I hope for John Higgins' sake he does a little bit better, because we have to keep... We like Precious John, don't we? We like the Wizard. We like the Wizard to do well.
Very, very interesting. So, of course, you've went for the favourite, the boring one. So I've got
a betting
Ronnie.
Man, you should know this by now.
I've got Ronnie versus Mark in the semi-final, and over the best of 33. I disagree with what you said. I think Ronnie would have far too much for Mark Williams in a best of 33. He's got an incredible record, World Championship record against Mark Williams. So I would back Ronnie to win that 17-11, 17-12, something like that. In the other semi-final, Kyron versus Jan. I could have went for the obvious one and said, well, Kyron's going to win that, and it's just going to be a repeat of last year's final. But I've actually backed Jan Bingtao to go to his first World Championship final. There just seems to be something about people that win the Masters and for the first time and going on a good run at the World Championship in the same year. So I'm going to go for Jan Bingtao to beat Kyron Wilson. And then Ronnie O'Sullivan, the greatest of all time, six-time world champion, bidding for his 7th, record equaling 7th, against the young upstart Jan Bingtao. I think that would be an awesome way to end the tournament. I think it would be a very, very good match, but I think it'll just be one step too far for Jan. And somehow, I certainly didn't think I would going into this, but I've predicted that Ronnie O'Sullivan will win his 7th world title at the end, and he'll finally end his bad run in finals this season and win his first ranked event of the season, which seems crazy to say that he hasn't won one yet. But I've got Ronnie to come out on top, which I wasn't expecting to say. I didn't fancy him before this conversation.
No, I don't really fancy Judd Trump, funnily enough. It's a funny one how these things work. It's very reminiscent to some of my album reviews on my music channel, that you don't expect things to turn out the way they do, but they certainly end up doing so. I would actually more go along with you that Ronnie's got a very good chance here, but Ronnie's just one of those hot and cold players. So I guess you could say for a lot of these players, they are hot and cold, particularly given the issues with COVID-19, and no, that's not a temperature reference. But it really opens it up. I think it's a cracking draw. I really do. There are plenty of good matches. I think that as we've said, the match of the first round is Ding against Stuart Bingham, but there are little matches in there, the likes of Jack Lezowski against Ali Carter, Barry Hawkins against Matt Selt, even young versus old, Bingtao against Martin Gould. And who knows how Mark Joyce will get on. I mean, we could see something crazy once again, like we saw with James Cahill, of course, a few years ago. I can't see, but you never know. We could see Stuart Bingham be a qualifier that wins the tournament. I think that's feasible if things go his way. Ali Carter's someone who could come through the woodwork. So I suppose with that notion, I'm not going to give the obvious one of Bingham. I'll leave a little bit more time to think about this. Who is your qualifier to watch?
Matt Selt for me.
Okay, interesting. I think there's a lot.
Jamie
there.
Jones. Jamie Jones is the other one.
Yeah, I thought you might go for Jamie Jones. I'm not going to go for the two obvious ones, which I've just said of Ali Carter and Stuart Bingham. I am going to go with what you could consider a little bit of an oddball. I'm going to say Lou Haashan is a very unknown quantity, purely because I back him to beat Mark Allen. Now, for your Jamie Jones prediction, I understand you back him to beat Maguire. For both of yours, with Jamie Jones and Matt Selt, I can't really see him winning that first round. And as we know with this World Championship, the first round is that all-important match. And if he wins that first round, again, I know it's really tough with Mark Selby, but there is just always somebody you don't expect that comes out the woodwork. And looking at that this year, he's somebody that quite literally nobody has talked about, and it makes it understandable with John Higgins, Mark Williams, Mark Allen, Mark Selby all being in that four. But who knows, he might be one to watch. That's just something to go against my obvious choice of Bingo and Ali Carter, your mate.
Yeah, no, I think it, no disrespect, we've said it's quite a weak qualifying field, really, compared to what we might have expected. But certainly some very interesting players in there. And as you say, there's always somebody that comes through and does a Gary Wilson, does a Dave Gilbert, does an Anthony McGill, and gets through to the semi-final. So really looking forward to seeing what comes about from it all. It's all kicking off on Saturday, 10 o'clock on the BBC. Hazel's back, which fingers crossed. Her management have apparently confirmed it. I'll believe it when I see it. But I'm really looking forward to seeing Hazel back presenting it. Of course, the BBC guys, John Virgo back at the World Championship, Ton Up, and Dennis and Ken and Alan Mcmanus and Steve and John. It's just going to be great to have the gang back together. And I don't think anything can beat that.
Hang on. What about Radsey?
Yeah, so Radsey, fantastic.
And what about Joe Perry? Because he was on it last year, if you remember, wasn't he?
Joe Perry was, but then he was playing there last year, so I don't know if they'll bring him up because he hasn't qualified, obviously. So
it's an interesting show. But I mean, I know it sounds really sad, but the coverage is half the battle, isn't it?
Yeah. It really is. I just think it'll be great, and I think it could be one of the greatest world championships. I think the standard this season of snooker has been terrific, and I do think I think we could see the centuries record broken this year. I think we'll see lots of deciders, lots of close matches, and hopefully, I'm fingers crossed for a decider in the final. We haven't had one since 2002. It would be fantastic to have one. But
and based on that, final question before we finish.
Yeah. In
minutes, how many minutes do you give it before the 85 black ball final is mentioned? I'll go with an hour. I'll go with 60. I'll give it an hour for them to mention it.
I'm gonna go 43 minutes because the first frame against Ronnie and Mark Joyce is gonna go to a respotted black, and they'll mention it then. So there you go. With it being the 36 year anniversary of it, that very famous landmark. But unless you've got anything else to add, Toby, I think we're about done.
Watch it on BBC. Don't watch on Eurosport.
Yeah, support our,
if you're in the UK, of course.
Our host broadcaster, who have been supporting snooker since the 60s. They were the ones that popularised snooker, and snooker was the one that brought about colour TVs and all of that. So, go and support it. Give it a watch. If you haven't watched snooker before, and there might be people listening to this that haven't.
Let's be fair, Joe. They haven't got to this point if they've never watched snooker before.
if you have, I know I have a few fans from my YouTube channel that watch any old rubbish I put out. So, give it a watch, give it a go, and when the clubs open again, go down your local club, pick up a queue and have a go at it, because it is just fantastic, and we're going to have a terrific 17 days. It ends on Bank Holiday Monday, which is always a nice one.
Day off work, absolutely.
Yeah, it's been really good to talk actually for the last hour and 20 minutes. I don't think either of us expected or wanted it to last this long, but I've thoroughly enjoyed every second of it, really. And I think it will be a really great tournament. It'll be one to remember, and maybe, just maybe, it could be the tournament that Ronnie O'Sullivan finally equals Stephen Hendry's record of 7 World Championship titles. So we'll see. But thank you very much.
Hendry goes and wins an 8th next year.
Well, of course, maybe the seniors.
We've got all that to come.
Maybe the seniors World Championship. I don't see him.
Dennis will win that.
Yeah, I hope so. But no, thank you very much for listening, everybody. Remember that we are on Spotify as well as our new channel, which we made, which is Joe and Toby Talk. Just a quick one at the end here. We haven't mentioned it, but thank you very much for the support on our first episode of that. We were blown away by how many people were watching, the comments, the likes, and you know, the people that are subscribing. We're going to be talking about the World Championship again. We're definitely going to be doing a review, and if we feel like there's stuff to talk about, we might do one halfway through after all the first rounds have been completed, and we'll see what we think about it then. But we'll definitely do a review of the World Championship. Of course, we've got the Imola Grand Prix happening this weekend as well in Formula 1, so I'm sure we'll be talking about that sometime next week. But thank you very much for listening. Leave a like on the video. Go and check out both of our channels, Captain Goodspeed and TRJ Gaming and TRJ Music and TRJ Education, and you know, go and check out all of our channels, and all those links are down in the description. Follow us on Twitter, all of that good stuff. And well, enjoy the World Championship, 10 o'clock on Saturday the 17th of April 2021. It's going to be a good one.
Cheers, guys.